Yeah, I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Erica, also known as Wild Food Girl, and this class is called Healthy and Wild. So I want to thank my husband Greg for setting up better audio and video than I've had in the past. And so for this class, we're going to look at health strategies that can prevent or heal chronic disease. And it's part of a bigger online program that I teach about edible and edible, yes, medicinal too, but edible wild plants and mushrooms. So if you joined through my website, you probably saw the different classes that I offer. And that program, for people who subscribe to all of the classes, is called WFG Learn. Um, so yeah, but this class is a bit of a departure from what I normally do. And the reason I was motivated to do it is because I got sick. I got cancer. And then I implemented a huge dietary and lifestyle intervention that really transformed my health. And so, you know, after that, I kind of looked at my wild food career and I was like, I was telling people how to make sugar syrup and fried food and dandelion greens wilted in bacon fat with hard boiled eggs on top. And I thought, I think now these things really aren't healthy and I can't in good conscience advocate them. So that's where the idea for Healthy and Wild as a series came from, because there is absolutely a way that we can eat wild food and prepare wild food in ways that are very healthy for us. So this idea I've been kicking around for a while, and I was curious if people were interested. So I emailed the folks who do subscribe to my larger WFG Learn program, and 9 out of 10 people who responded wanted this class. So here we are. I have been preparing for many weeks. It's a little daunting because it's a little out of my wheelhouse, but my hope is that some of this information can reach people, that can reach some people, can help people because it's helped me a lot. Um, I decided to offer the class for free just because I want to reach a lot of people, and I'm really tickled at how many people signed up. So thanks and welcome. If you're one of the WFG Learn members, thanks so much for supporting this program of classes that I do. It helps so much. And if you're new here and you haven't been at any of my classes, or especially if you haven't been on my email list before, welcome. You did end up getting signed up for the email list when you registered if you weren't on it before, but you can always unsubscribe just by clicking a link at the bottom if you don't want to stay on the list. This is a live class, so if you have any questions or comments, please type them into the chat, and we'll take about 30 minutes at the end to just go through as many as we can. Um, in other classes, we've taken turns talking on video, but I just think this might be a little too big for that. The presentation is pretty jam-packed with resources, so you don't have to write everything down. I'm going to provide a list of links under the replay when I email you a link to the replay. So if there's something that interests you, maybe you're more interested in diabetes than cancer, there will be links for the different areas that might interest you that you can look into deeper. So, off the bat, I want to say the major nutritional strategy we will be exploring here is a whole food, plant-based diet. So that is a diet that's either exclusively plant foods or centered on plant foods with minimal animal products. There are a lot of diets out there that people say are healthy. I mean, you can, go through them, the DASH diet, the Mediterranean diet, the Whole 40, ketogenic diet, paleo diet, macrobiotic diet. I mean, I could go on and on. But, you know, not all of them overlap, but most of them do overlap. And most nutritionists agree that a diet very high in plant foods, so we're talking vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds, whole grains and beans, is the most healthy diet that we can do. I mean, whether there are little differences between some of them, more plant foods, more healthy. So, where do wild foods fit in the picture? Well, wild foods, there are a lot of benefits of eating wild foods. So, they're organic if you get them from a clean place, and They tend to be higher in health promoting phytonutrients than conventionally produced produce. If you pick it and eat it the same day, then it's going to be higher in some of the nutrients that go down, that diminish as the food spends time getting to the grocery store. And we will get into the benefits of wild foods specifically in future sessions in this series. But today I want to give a big picture that includes conventional foods too, because most of us are not eating 100% wild foods. So again, this series is called Healthy and Wild. Today is the big picture overview of the nutritional approach that we will use in subsequent sessions as we cook healthy wild food. Um, so, just a preview of what to expect today. We're going to start with my story and then dive into the health benefits of a plant based diet. And then to answer some of the kinds of questions that inevitably arise, we'll also look at what the data says about why excess animal products can be detrimental to our health. And then we'll close with 10 to 15 minutes on what is a whole food plant-based diet. And yeah, so I just want to emphasize I'm not a doctor. I'm taking kind of a journalistic approach to this. So to report what I've learned to you, but it's also my personal story because if I knew that these changes that I've made could have benefited my health so much, I would have done it 20 years ago. My life might have taken a different course. So I want to share it as widely as I can. Um, this is a big picture concept. So we all have individual differences that might cause you to tailor things here and there. I certainly have. But in general, eating healthier is largely free of side effects, more so certainly than medicines and even supplements as well. So I think it's a pretty safe strategy, and I'm really excited about it. So, my story, I thought I was healthy. I think most of us think that we are healthy. And, this is how you end up with elite athletes who drop dead of a heart attack at age 40 because they might think they're healthy because they're exercising a lot, but maybe they're not eating well. Maybe for other reasons, disease processes are happening in the background. And so, pretty much every one of us is going to get a chronic disease in our lifetime. The chance of getting cancer is 1 in 3. Now, you'd rather push that off till you're 95 and had a good long life. But other chronic conditions, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, I could name them all, but pretty much we will all get something. Again, the idea is push it off, and try to live as long as we can free of debilitating disease. And I think that we can do that with our own agency, with our own decisions that we make. So I had asthma and allergies my whole life, pretty bad, and still I thought it was healthy because I thought it was normal. I just I exercised a lot. I was fairly thin. And yeah, I had this story I told myself that I could eat anything I wanted because I was so healthy. And, I ate a lot of meat, cheese, milk, eggs, 3 meals a day, more than vegetables. And I love my junk food like cheese puffs and sugary bottled Starbucks drinks. And, I just didn't know how much that was affecting my health. And I'm not blaming the cancer entirely on what I ate. Cancer is multifactorial, but we can change what we eat and use other strategies to just maximize our health or optimize our health. And that was something I wasn't that clear on, like that direct effect. So, yeah, at age 46, I found cancer. I found a lump in my breast, and it was breast cancer. That was November of 2020. Um, and it was an early stage estrogen dependent tumor, if that interests you. Um, and the doctors wanted to just rush me into surgery, rush me into radiation, rush me into chemo. And I did some of those treatments. I didn't end up doing the chemo. And that's a personal decision that I based on reading a lot of papers and getting a lot of second opinions. My more recent oncologists believe that was the right decision, but I'm not advocating don't do chemo. It's something we would all have to look into ourselves. But um, you know, the other thing I thought is, what can I do to help? Because my type of cancer, it's not very curable. I mean, it tends to come back. And so I still think, what can I do to minimize that possibility? Because I want to live a good long life. I have a lot of life left of me to live. So the other thing I thought was, if this mind and body, as it was at the time, built a cancer, then what can I do differently? How can I radically overhaul my body and my mind to fight or not build any more cancers? So this is where I'm coming from. And if you give me just a second to share a slide. Okay. So, yeah, when I found my cancer, it was pretty serendipitous because at the time I had been reading this book on the left, Whole by T. Colin Campbell. He's a nutrition researcher. And, back in the day, he was trying to solve malnutrition in developing countries and that was a time when everybody thought that malnutrition was caused by a lack of protein from people not getting enough meat and dairy. And so he actually found in a couple different locations where he studied people, he actually found the opposite. Populations that ate more animal protein had higher rates of cancer, heart disease, and chronic illnesses. So the China study is one of the studies where he found that. It was a huge study. If you're interested in any of these books, and then this one on the right is actually a documentary, the Forks Over Knives documentary, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. But if you're not, this gives an excellent overview of what I've been talking about his research, and it has a lot of individual stories of healing of people who have changed to a healthy plant-based diet and been able to reverse disease. So I found that so inspirational. It was one of the early films I watched when I was trying to strategize what I could do for myself to promote my own health. You also hear in this video from Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. Um, and both he and Dr. Campbell grew up on dairy farms, and their families sold milk, and they thought milk did the body good, like we all did. And both of them had scientific discoveries that suggested otherwise. So these two doctors are among the pioneers of what is now called a whole food plant-based diet. And, it is essentially vegan or almost vegan, depending on how strict you want to be implementing it if you decide to give it a try. But it is not talking about junk food vegan where you eat like fake cheese and impossible burgers. It's about eating food in its most whole form as possible, um, and minimizing highly processed foods. So, yeah, that is what I did. I switched to a whole food, plant-based diet, and I embraced also what is called SOS free eating, which is a diet free of added salt, oil, and sugar. And let that sink in for a minute because that sounds daunting, I'm sure. But that is what I did. So I want to be clear about that. I did both things, and I kind of did it 100% overnight. Yeah, there's nothing like the threat of your imminent demise to light a fire under you. So I fully transformed my diet and my lifestyle. And then the most amazing things happened. I couldn't believe it. In 4 months, I lost 25 pounds. And that's like five-pound sacks of flour. And I kept it off because I'm still basically doing what I was doing 4 years ago. I'm like maybe 98 to 99% adherent now. But it wasn't a diet that I did for 6 weeks and then stopped. It was a committed life change that I'm still committed to. Um, so let's see. We store a lot of toxins in our fats, so it was a big detox for me. And then I started regular aerobic and strength training exercises, and I rebuilt my body to be thin and full of muscle. So I consider myself this is Erica 2.0 now. So I wanted to show one more slide, and then I'm going to switch the view back. But so my BMI, so if you're not familiar with body mass index, again, I'll have links to all of this stuff in the replay. But if you're not familiar with the body mass index, it's a calculation of kind of where you want to be with your weight to promote the best health. And so, and especially in breast cancer, you want to be at the bottom end of BMI. So you just basically input your height and your weight and you compute it. And then, kind of in the middle of the screen on the right, it says BMI categories. You look at your number and see where you are. It's not an exact measure because it doesn't take muscle into account as well. But my BMI is now 21, which is at the low end of normal, which is where we want to be specifically to prevent a breast cancer recurrence. But a lot of other health conditions benefit from getting to that more ideal weight. So yeah, let's see one more slide. Oh no, she didn't. A before and after picture, you know. So here I am on the left in my black bikini, and yeah, I wasn't that overweight. I really wasn't. But I have kind of this pear shape, and you can see that the weight is concentrated around my stomach, my lower stomach, which is where we don't want to be collecting fat because it is more dangerous, because uh, it is involved in disease processes. And then, with my transformation on the right, we didn't do another bikini picture, but you can see like now I'm muscular and standing upright, not so sloppy and just quite healthy. I feel like you can see the difference in those slides, which is why I share them. So yeah. So anyway, that wasn't the only thing that happened. I did lose that 25 pounds of weight, which was awesome. But also, we suspected I had sleep apnea because my husband would hear me in the night kind of struggling to breathe, like, that's gone away. That is no longer something that happens to me. And then the most exciting thing was that I cured my lifelong asthma. I mean, I was taking that rescue inhaler 5 days a week, 5 times a day, 7 days a week for decades. And my asthma has vanished without a trace. It happened about, I don't know, 6 months in. And I've literally thrown away my inhalers now, which is just insane to me. I live at 10,000 feet in Colorado's mountains, and I can now mountain bike uphill at that elevation in the thin air, and I never get an asthma attack. Do I get out of breath? Yeah, of course I do. But I don't get and need to stop and take my inhaler. So totally cured. And how many doctors did I see in my youth? Like 10 different doctors. I had a full Ziploc bag full of medicine. Nothing worked. And then now I changed my diet and I can cure myself. And I'm not saying that'll work for everybody, but it did work for me, and it's worth a try because, again, it's not bad for your health to eat vegetables and to eat fruits and healthy whole foods. So that was kind of amazing. And you know, asthma is largely a condition of uh, inflammation. So I do understand now that I lived my life in a largely inflamed state. And guess what needs inflammation to take hold? Cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Inflammation is what we don't want. And we can reduce it significantly by basing our diet around whole plant foods. So, for me, I just feel so much better. I have more energy, less mood swings, which is saying something since I'm just entering into menopause pretty soon here. And when I do go off diet and eat a lot of junk food, because I am a little bit of a food addict. I mean, if I let myself have that croissant at the bakery, I will sometimes go on a 2-day binge eating a lot of croissants and cookies. And then after that, I just totally feel the pain. Like my body hurts. I get depressed. I don't want to get off the couch. And it's a pretty stark change now that I'm paying attention to it. So in my case, it was, let me see if I can share the screen again here. Oh, yes, one last look. Okay, let me change the slide. Okay, so in my case, it was cancer and also asthma that were impacted by changing to a plant-based diet. But there are a lot of chronic conditions that can be radically altered by a big change like that. So I want to share a couple of those. I was most familiar for a while with this study on the right, which is on prostate cancer. So, prostate cancer is that's a real rough one for men. I mean, if you decide to get the surgery and the chemo and the radiation, there's a good chance you get erectile dysfunction and also urinary incontinence. So, plenty of men decide to wait and just see if it progresses or not. So, in this study, they divided a group of men who had decided to wait into two groups. One group had lifestyle interventions. I don't think it was fully vegan. They did, let's see, what did they do? They ate a low fat, whole food, vegetarian diet. And then they also did exercise, stress management, quit smoking, and belonged to a support group that they would meet regularly. And after 5 years of this, the group that had all those lifestyle interventions, none of them needed conventional treatment, while six of the guys in the other group who didn't do the interventions needed surgery, radiation, or hormone therapy. And then, if you're familiar with the PSA, that's a measure of that the doctor takes to see if there's a chance you have prostate cancer. The PSA levels decreased by 4% in the lifestyle group, but they increased by 6% in the control group that didn't do anything differently. Um, Researchers also dripped their blood onto prostate cancer cells in a petri dish, and the lifestyle group's blood inhibited the cancer growth by 70%, but blood from the control group was only inhibited by 9%. So you can see, like, I mean, for me, the takeaway is whether you choose to get conventional treatment or not, lifestyle changes can absolutely help. And it's proven with prostate cancer. So that study was led by Dr. Dean Ornish, and he's actually done a couple of pretty cool lifestyle intervention studies. I wasn't familiar with this one on the left, the coronary heart disease study, but similar thing. They took a team and did similar lifestyle interventions, and the group that had the interventions, their arterial blockages decreased, so they could actually measure less atherosclerosis, if I'm pronouncing that right, in the blood vessels, which is pretty significant and cool. I mean, you kind of think you get heart disease and it can't be reversed, but what we're learning is that it can be reversed through our own efforts. So I mentioned Dr. Oh, yeah. Also, chest pain was reduced by 91% after 1 year. And the lifestyle group had fewer cardiac events, but the control group, their disease progressed as normal. So I like this quote by Dr. Esselstyn, who, well, before I say that, I mentioned Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn before. He was one of the dairy farmers in Forks Over Knives. And he was a cardiologist who performed heart surgeries. So, I mean, this is not just any old Joe who's thinking this is the right way to go. This is an actual cardiologist. And he started coaching his patients to eat a 100% plant based diet and found that even his sickest patients, at least, I don't know if it was all of his, but his sickest patients could reverse their disease. And so, yeah, in his initial study, 5 participants had been told they had less than 1 year to live. 12 years later, they were all alive and symptom free. So I just find so much hope in that. And I like this quote from him because he says some people think the plant-based whole food diet is extreme, but 500,000 people a year will have their chest opened up and a vein taken from their leg and sewn onto their coronary artery. Some people would call that extreme. I mean, what if you could change your diet and not have to have that surgery? And that's what he's been showing. I mean, so anyway, and then this was one that just came out, also led by Dr. Ornish. I was excited to see this study. This was last year, 2024, and they studied people with Alzheimer's disease, specifically people with early stage cognitive impairment. And they found that the whole food plant based diet and lifestyle interventions significantly impacted cognitive function, slowed the disease, and improved, like, actually biomarkers that they can test for, to determine if you have Alzheimer's. So Yeah, and there was one story of a man who did that, and I can't remember. It might have been in a video I saw with Dr. Ornish, but this man played in a marching band in a parade, and he was starting to forget the songs and like what song was next, and he was getting confused and he was frustrated. And after the intervention, he was sharp again. I mean, to actually be able to reverse that, are you kidding me? Like, can it really work? And it seems like it can, and there's no reason not to try because I probably said this 5 times, vegetables are not going to hurt us. So, um, yeah, my mom is a little like, my mom sometimes is like, oh, well, I have too much meat in the freezer. We can't give up meat. And I think, why not try quitting animal foods and processed foods for like just 1 month, right? It's just a month of your life. And imagine and see how you feel. Because for me, it was pretty magical watching the weight come off, for one. Um, and then, suddenly having energy for a run that used to kick my butt was also really nice. And, I just think it feels wonderful to feel healthy. So it did take a couple weeks for my tastes to change, but once they did, really what I crave is healthy vegetable foods most of the time, unless you're just shoving donuts in my face. And then, yeah, I crave the donuts. So again, what I did was a strict plant-based whole food diet that was also free of salt, oil, and sugar. And part of what we'll get into in future sessions is like, how do you do that? How do you reduce salt, oil, and sugar? Or what are some of the nuances? Don't I need salt if I'm really, really hydrated? Yeah, you will need extra salt if you're really hydrated. So there are some nuances with that approach, but just so you know, that's basically what I did. And I did other things too, which I'll mention briefly and talk about in future sessions. But the food is a big one, and it's all we have time for today. So yeah. Moving forward, I know that not everyone's going to want to go 100% vegan. Like, I get it. I'm actually more like 98 to 99% adherent to my dietary choices right now. And there is such a thing as a flexitarian diet, which is a popular one where you eat a little bit of fish, a little bit of eggs. But, maybe if you were eating them 3 meals a day, you get it down to 1 meal a day. Or maybe you get it down to 1 meal a week. I mean, again, there's some room for interpretation. Um, but a lot of the data that we have on the benefits of these type of diets comes from the Adventist Health Study 2. And what you're looking at is 3 different papers that were written based on that study. And what they did was they looked at 96,000 Seventh day Adventists who live longer than the general population. They refrain from smoking and drinking, they exercise regularly, and many of them are vegetarian. So these 3 papers, some of the takeaways: people who ate a healthy vegan diet had the lowest risk of diabetes, high blood pressure, and also had the lowest BMI, that body mass index or weight. And then vegans also had a 34% lower risk of female specific cancers like breast and ovarian cancer, which of course rings a bell for me. That's okay, okay. I need that. Um, Vegans had a 15% lower risk of all cause mortality, not counting like car accidents and stuff. But interestingly, however, the pesco vegetarians who ate some fish had a 19% lower, so they did better on just this one measure. So I think there is some room for interpretation as to what's the best approach, and I don't want to just come forth and tell you like I know everything because I'm figuring this out as I go too. I will eat a little bit of fish occasionally, like if my dad catches a fish, but I don't consider it part of my health strategy. So, and the thing is, for me, I did find it easier to go all in. Like, it's easier not to stray when you do that. Otherwise, stray a little, then stray some more, and then stray some more. And the Ornish studies did show that the more radical the change, the bigger the result. So for me, the takeaway there is, if I'm already sick, if I'm already plagued by a chronic condition, then I might elect for a more radical approach. If I'm trying to prevent disease that hasn't yet touched my life, maybe I would let myself be a little bit, have my piece of fish once a week. You know, I was super strict for several years, maybe a little orthorexic, like a little afraid of what I was eating. So you don't want to get into a place where food stresses you out, because stress is also not good for you. Stress also causes inflammation. But now I do what the online personality Chris Wark calls recreational eating from time to time. And so that means I might go out to dinner and have something I consider off diet as a treat, but then I'm back at it. So I just wanted to show you who Chris is, because, and I was talking to some folks in the chat about him. He has the website Chris Beat Cancer, and I'm just absolutely so fond of him. I haven't met him, but he was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer at just age 26, and he had surgery, but then he didn't do the other treatments and he embraced nutritional and supplement strategies and a lot of other strategies. And he's now 47 and he's been cancer free for 21 years. There's just so much hope in his work. So if you are someone who's faced with a cancer diagnosis, I would recommend him if you haven't found him already. And he's Christian, if that matters to you. And he has a really great podcast where he interviews both people who survived against the odds in part through their own agency, and then also scientists. So I really like his interviews as well. He has a good free download, 20 questions for your oncologist, that if you are dealing with a cancer diagnosis, I would recommend getting that download and reading the questions and asking your oncologist. But yeah, whether you choose to get treatment or not, I think he has a lot of great strategies. So what's wrong with animal products? I'm not trying to be a hater about animal products. I ate a ton of animal products in my life. My brother-in-law is a hunter. My dad is a fisherman. I grew up fishing. I like going clamming. I like clam chowder. And I know a lot of people here in the wild food space love their wild game, or maybe you raise your own chickens, you raise your own cows. So I think, all of these are much healthier sources of meat than our factory farmed, hormone injected animals. And I also know that our ancestors ate meat. That's a common argument. Well, this is what our ancestors did, and they were healthy, and grandma was healthy, so I'm going to keep doing this too. Um, but the fact is that we are just eating so much more meat and dairy and, quite frankly, sugar than we used to also. So this is a screenshot from that same documentary, Forks Over Knives. And I've added the dates down here so you could see them. But basically, near the beginning of the century, as our society, ate about 120 pounds of meat annually. But by 2007, that number has become 222 pounds. So almost double. In 1913, we ate about 40 pounds of sugar a year. And by 1999, sugar plus high fructose corn syrup and other processed sweeteners, we now eat about 147 pounds or more a year. So that is more than 3 times as much as we used to eat just, 100 years ago. And then in 1909, we were eating 294 pounds of dairy products. And by 2006, we're eating 605 pounds a year. So I feel that between that and the massive processed food and herbicides and pesticides on our food, we've really set the stage for this massive health crisis that we are experiencing today as a society. So I personally see the plant-based diet as rectifying a problem that my grandparents maybe didn't have, that I now have. So what do I mean by animal products? All of them: milk, dairy, poultry, eggs, cheese, fish. And what's the problem with them? That's kind of a huge body of research that there's tons of studies and entire books written about it, and they're not all in agreement. I mean, there are a lot of industry interests that pollute the scientific integrity of the research that's available to us. The whole country, a lot of people have been convinced that eggs are still good. Everything's bad except eggs are good and fish is good. But I think there are some opposing arguments, not that they're bad, but that they should be a smaller part of the diet if you want to be flexitarian. And for me, again, quitting them entirely and see what it could do to my body was the best approach, but maybe not everybody's best approach. Um, so I'm going to just offer a summary of some arguments about how these are negatively affecting us. And, you know, I would recommend if you want to dig really deep, Dr. Michael Greger, who has nutritionfacts.org. And I really like his book, How Not to Die, where he goes through how not to die of breast cancer, how not to die of heart disease, how not to die of prostate cancer, and he goes through the ailments. And then the second half of the book is dedicated to really specific descriptions of all the different whole foods and how they can benefit us. And he cites all of his sources. So, like the last third of the book is all citations if you want to dig deeper. So, animal products in general tend to be just here's this kind of general discussion, but they tend to be higher in saturated fat and cholesterol, which we know to be involved in a lot of disease processes. They with high cholesterol, you're at a higher risk for heart disease, and saturated fat promotes inflammation and excess body fat. Saturated fat also plays a big role in diabetes, which is not well understood. Most people think they should eat a keto diet, they should eat a low carb diet because they don't want to eat the sugars to spike the blood. And, that is definitely true of highly processed starchy foods like bread and chips. But people think they can't eat a banana because it's going to spike their blood sugar. And it does spike your blood sugar, but that's because if you're diabetic, you have insulin resistance. The insulin is supposed to bring the sugars into your muscle cells for energy. That's what it's supposed to do. But if you have insulin resistance, that system isn't working well. And then the sugar stays in the bloodstream and causes the spike. So the good news is insulin resistance can be tackled. Not eating a banana is like um, trying not to get to the symptoms as opposed to getting at the root source. So, saturated fat buildup blocks your insulin receptors, so the glucose gets stuck in the bloodstream, and that's why your blood sugar raises. The thing is, you can get to the good root cause of insulin resistance by reducing saturated fat. And a really good way to do that is cut out all the animal products and the oils. Um, so I am a big fan of the work of two doctors, both of whom suffer from type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition, but the same strategies work with type 2 diabetes, which is kind of what builds over the years. From an unhealthy diet. So I'm most familiar with the story of Cyrus Khambatta, and I really like this book, Mastering Diabetes. There was a time that I was trying to lower my blood sugar because my integrative oncologist thought I needed to. So this is why I was looking into how to do that and looking beyond what's traditionally recommended. And I found these guys. So Cyrus Khambatta, he is the guy on the right in this snapshot of the video. And so he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was in college, and he tried the keto diet, he tried low carb, and things just kept getting worse. And then what he studied, and he ended up getting a PhD in nutritional biochemistry. And he learned that there's a whole body of research that shows that fat is involved in diabetes. So he promotes a low fat, whole food, plant based diet where you minimize the fats, you even keep your nuts and your avocados down a little bit too. Definitely the coconut oil cut that out. And he was able to lower his insulin that he had to take, and he's replicated that with many, many people. So if diabetes is something you're concerned about, I really I like this book. And I like this video. Here's my guy Chris again, my brother from another mother who I've never met. He interviewed Cyrus Khambatta at his website. Again, I'll have the link at the end, but you can hear Cyrus's story and then what he recommends. So I just think that's a really good resource that I wanted to share. So getting back to What's wrong with animal products? Sorry, sorry. Uh, but there's other things. Just a few things. They tend to disrupt gut health and promote inflammation, especially if you eat a lot. Um, the gut bacteria digest certain compounds in them to produce TMAO, which is a compound that increases inflammation. And you can measure that. That inflammation you can measure by C-reactive protein and interleukin 6. Like that's a measurable outcome. But it's linked to increased heart disease and stroke. Diets high in animal products, as well as being dehydrated, increase your risk for kidney stones because they create the acidic urine that is needed for the stones, for most stones to form. Plant foods make your urine more basic and the stones can't form as well. And this is with the exception of folks who have a genetic predisposition towards kidney stone formation. It's a small percentage of people, but people say, "Oh, don't eat spinach; it's high in oxalates." Most people can do fine with spinach, especially if they're not eating tons of animal products. And in fact, the spinach is helping to make the basic urine, the alkaline urine, to prevent the stones formation. Let's see, for men, a high animal fat diet, high animal food diet can also cause erectile dysfunction, and that's from narrowed arteries. So and it's considered a warning sign for heart attack and stroke. Like if you have erectile dysfunction, watch out, you're heading down the road towards heart disease, pretty soon. The good news is a plant-based diet can open those arteries back up and help return your function, you know, without resorting to Viagra, and may save your life in the process. So, hormones in animal products can promote cancer. There's a bunch of them. IGF-1, which is a growth factor, which we need for growing, but if it's going out of control, then it's promoting cancer growth. And so if you're high in IGF-1, there's a better chance that cancer is growing. Estrogen promotes definitely breast cancer, most breast cancers. And, cows, like they inject them with hormones, they inject them with estrogen, but uh, the cows themselves are also producing lots of estrogen. And it is actually shown that if you have high estrogen, you are more likely to get breast cancer. So we are exposed to a lot of environmental estrogens. We need to keep that down. Um, and there's other compounds in animal products. You may have heard of heterocyclic amines that are produced when meat is grilled or heated to a high temperature. And there's other ones too, heme iron. I will say a caveat. I mean, a single exposure to a carcinogenic compound doesn't necessarily lead to cancer. Um, that's why you can probably eat, grilled meat and not get cancer, at least if you're not eating a ton of it. But what we're worried about is like the toxic load being really high. The nice thing about a plant-based diet is that it helps to kill little cancer cells that form in us all the time. And, it by enhancing our immune system. And also, the toxic load isn't as high. Uh, yeah, what else? One last thing on this note. Um, Processed meats are particularly dangerous for a number of reasons. They've been classified by the World Health Organization as a group 1 carcinogen known to cause cancer. That's the same group as smoking is in. Linked to higher heart disease and stroke. And so I would just say put something else in your sandwich. I mean, my family ate so many cold cuts, like my whole childhood, my whole adulthood, cold cuts in the fridge, sandwich for lunch every single day. My husband now puts cucumbers and peppers and hummus in his sandwich, a much healthier alternative. And I usually eat salad. But a few more things about animal products. So, dairy. You might think, okay, I'm going to have the low fat milk, but it's not just the fat in dairy. There's a protein that's the major part of dairy called casein, that's linked to inflammation and has been shown to promote cancer growth, at least in a petri dish. You get extra estrogen in the dairy too. We talked about that. This slide, though, really rocked my world when I was looking into this. Not that one, this one. Bovine leukemia virus is a virus found in 84% of US cattle. And it has been found, this virus has been found in 59% of breast cancer tumors studied in the US. And it has been found in 80% of breast cancer patients in Australia. So the exposure comes from dairy products, and also to some extent from contact with cows. But yeah, so that just floored me because I got breast cancer and I used to drink so much milk, a glass of milk a day. I love my milk as an adult, and I think it's dangerous. I think it's pretty dangerous. Okay, cheese. I really like this gentleman, Neil Barnard. I've heard a lot of his interviews. I haven't read his books yet, so I'm looking forward to getting into them. The one on the right is the most recent, but he wrote a whole book about cheese, and cheese is like 70% fat, has more salt than potato chips, it's full of estrogen, but nobody wants to give cheese up. I mean, when you say, hey, want to do a whole food plant-based diet for your health, the one thing people say, oh, I can't give up my cheese, you know? So, well, there's actually a reason for it. Cheese contains narcotic, like opiate-like compounds in it called casomorphines that actually addict you. Good news is a couple of weeks of not eating cheese, you are less interested in eating cheese, but it's addictive. There's a reason you want to keep eating it. It's addictive. Poultry. Oh, well. Oh, sorry. Here's Neil Barnard again being interviewed by Chris. The link is at the end. I liked this interview. It was mostly on hormones, but he gives again a good overview of why different animal products might be detrimental to your health if eaten to excess. And he also founded something called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. They put out well, it's a series of videos, but you can also listen to them as a podcast. This is one of the podcasts I listen to a lot, in addition to Chris Beat Cancer. If you're looking for a new health-based podcast, I would highly recommend it. So, uh, we're almost through the meat section, then we'll dive into the whole food plant-based section for the final part of this presentation. But yeah, fish. Oh, actually, I should have kept the screen on. 1 second. Yeah, chicken, people think, well, I should just eat my skinless chicken because that's less fatty, but it's actually really fatty too. And in fact, in this study, it was found that red meat and white meat equally raised LDL cholesterol. So, there's a lot of fat in fish. You know, Chinook salmon has as much fat as steak, according to Neil Barnard's presentation. Fish can also accumulate like mercury and PCBs and dioxin. So it's probably the healthier of all the things. And I'll eat fish occasionally. Like I said, if my dad goes fishing, comes home with a piece of fish, but I don't think it's necessarily something that I feel comfortable organizing my diet around. Last one is eggs. Egg yolks are one of the highest sources of dietary cholesterol. Um, the whites don't have saturated fat, but they do have a protein linked to type 2 diabetes. And I didn't really dive too much into eggs, but I would refer you to Dr. Michael Greger. We saw his website, nutritionfacts.org. He has a series of videos on eggs. So if you want to look a little deeper into eggs, because you thought that was the one thing that was super healthy to eat a lot of, at least if you want to expose yourself to an alternate viewpoint, I'd check out his videos. Awesome. Thanks for sticking with me. So, yeah, what is a whole food plant-based diet? It's a diet, like we said, based on minimally processed foods. It usually doesn't have labels on it, except for those pesky fruit stickers. You make food out of these whole foods from scratch at home. Uh, Most food is processed. So we're also avoiding whole food is a minimal, like I said, minimally processed. So most food is processed. You can't say it's unprocessed. I mean, these are lamb's quarter seeds, a wild seed that I processed by rubbing and winnowing and rinsing and rubbing and cooking to make into a quinoa-like grain. Obviously, I processed it, but it's not highly processed. Highly processed, Wonder Bread is a highly processed food, right? And if you look at the ingredient list, it's pretty obvious. It just has this really long list of ingredients that you don't know what they are. And once you start seeing that, you're dealing with a highly processed food. They usually are high in sugar, high in salt, high in fat, might be high in trans fats, which are particularly unhealthy. They're made to be addictive. Food scientists are making them addictive for you so that you keep buying them. And they have a lot of non-food chemicals, and they're usually low in fiber, which the body needs, and low in nutrients. So that's kind of a definition of a highly processed food. And what did that Wonder Bread come from? It came from these wheat berries. This is wheat in its least processed form. I mean, they took the chaff off so it wouldn't hurt your throat, but uh, you can buy these. They're called wheat berries. You can buy them dry and you can cook them up as a grain, and you can eat wheat as a whole grain if you're not sensitive to wheat, which I'm not, but some people are. And I have to, of all the names over here, Cheese Slave is the person who took this photo. I borrowed some photos from the internet, photos that have been licensed for reuse under a Creative Commons license. And then I'm attributing them to the authors here. So Cheese Slave, of all people, took this photo. Okay. I did mention, highly processed vegan foods are not, it's why a vegan diet isn't the ideal thing. It's a whole food, plant-based diet because a vegan diet leaves room for highly processed junk food, just labeled vegan or labeled gluten-free, but it can still be junk food. So you could see the long list of ingredients in this fake cheese and the long list of ingredients in this fake meat. I actually, when I started, I was super excited about Beyond Burgers, and they are healthier than hamburgers. But you look at this. I mean, total fat 22 grams, saturated fat 7 grams. That's huge. And that is because they put coconut oil and canola oil in order to make it feel like meat in your mouth, to make it oily. They actually did just come out with a lower fat version, but I generally consider this to be unhealthy. Will I eat it once in a while? Maybe. Yeah, sure. Because, we can't make ourselves so crazy. I have to walk that line myself personally. But in general, I would not consider this something to organize a healthy diet around. I love going to the store now and finding all sorts of different grains that I can cook up. It's if I'm eating less meat, eating less dairy, then there's all sorts of really exciting other things to eat that maybe you've never tried before, and I hadn't tried a lot of them. One of the tools in my arsenal is an Instant Pot. I'm not getting paid for this, but it's just so easy to get a quick recipe, put my grains in there and my water and cover it up and set it to go and come back an hour later and it's ready to go. I also do that with beans, and then I make big batches and I have them in the fridge. So I've got my batch of beans, my batch of grains that I can then use in different preparations with vegetables for healthy food. Um, I do indulge in plant milk. I like to have it. It tastes good. I don't make my own. I have, or my husband has, um, but if I look at the label on this one, we're looking at the ingredients are just water and soybeans. So I feel like it's a better one. It's a lesser evil. And so we do use this. I know some nutritionists teach no soy, but I'm pretty convinced by the research that soy can be protective. And it's too much to go into now, but we do eat soy. We eat tofu. We eat soybeans. If you're buying plant milks, watch out because they're always sweetened unless they say unsweetened. So it's kind of weird. You wouldn't expect it, but okay. What else do we eat? Wonderful fruits. They taste so good when you're not eating sugar if you don't eat sugar for a couple weeks, all of a sudden the fruits are just like ambrosial. So my family goes to Mexico every year, and I go immediately to the market and get all the fruits I've never heard of, or I don't get to eat often, like guavas and mamey, and just it's just so exciting, cut them up, make a beautiful fruit bowl. It's really nice to eat fruit when you don't eat sugar. Um, of course, I'm in the wild food sphere, so let's have some pictures of some wild fruits. And the picture on the right, actually the four-part picture, is the cover slide for my one of my classes on edible wild berries. Now, I'm located in the Rocky Mountain region, and a lot of my classes center on plants in those regions. But what I've tried to do in those classes is expand my comments to other regions, telling you about lookalikes in other regions. So I've tried to make those classes as universally useful as possible. If you're interested, those are at wildfoodgirl.com. Yeah, I'm going to use some more wild food to illustrate vegetables. Vegetables are so good for every vegetable, the root vegetables, carrots, yams, zucchini and whatever vegetable. They're all good. They're all great. But greens are really good. Greens are jam packed full of nutrients. This is stinging nettles. Those are super high in protein, actually. You do not need animal meat to get enough protein. The animals ate the protein from the plants. Lamb's quarters is a really common garden weed, also high in nutrients. People call it like a wild spinach. And that one, too, if you're interested, I have a class on edible weeds that covers this plant. I do eat a ton of kale. Kale and other cruciferous vegetables or mustard family vegetables are really high in compounds that fight cancer and have other beneficial effects. So I do eat a ton of kale. And in the last 5 months or so, I've been eating a lot of kale in the form of smoothies. The smoothies are like, I fill the container like 3/4 kale, a little bit of spinach, some frozen fruit just to make it taste better, and a bunch of flax seeds or chia seeds for the omega 3s, because we usually are out of balance with omega 3s if we've been eating a heavy animal product based diet. And we want to bring that back into balance. Omega 3s are very important for a lot of body processes. So I drink one glass of this at breakfast, one at lunch, and one at dinner. And I've actually noticed some of my metrics moving in the right direction when I get my regular doctor checkups. And I feel really good with the smoothies. I learned about them from this woman, Brooke Goldner, who has the website smoothieshred.com. And she's a doctor, and has an interesting story because she was diagnosed with pretty advanced lupus when she was 16 years old, and she was basically in kidney failure. And she almost died. They said she was going to die, and they even put her on chemo to suppress her immune system for 2 years while she was 16 years old. So pretty terrible, but it actually did save her kidneys. And she went on to medical school. While she was there, she got engaged to this gentleman, Thomas Tadlock, and he was a physical trainer. And she said she wanted to lose weight for the wedding. And so he put her on a plant based, high raw plant foods, omega 3 diet. And she lost the weight she wanted, and her lupus disappeared. And she went, "What? How did this happen?" And so she has dedicated her life to well, that was a protocol. It was one of his protocols. They've now narrowed their protocols to 3. If you're fighting lupus or a serious autoimmune condition, then they have a very strict protocol, and then they have other protocols for just enhancing your health. Her concept is called hypernutrition. The idea is that we just don't get enough plant nutrition, and so we can bolster that through the smoothies. And I just she's got so many good results. I think she's really worth looking into, and I really love her YouTube videos. She's also a psychiatrist, so she helps people understand, why am I not sticking to the diet? What's going on with me? And she has group coaching programs and private coaching programs. You can see her as a doctor, or you could just go listen to all her free stuff, which is what I do. And I love her QAs. I mean, look at her. You can see that she just radiates positivity. And to me, there's a lot of hope in her work as well. Okay, back to whole food plant based. So nuts, a small amount, not a limit, a reasonable amount of nuts, really good to eat. These are walnuts, high in omega 3s. They're actually black walnuts, they're wild black walnuts. Seeds, also good in reasonable amounts. Flax seeds in even bigger amounts, just because they're so rich in omega 3s. Um, that's a good idea too. Mushrooms are not plants, but they fall into the whole food plant-based diet. There are a lot of good compounds in mushrooms for us. The one on the right is an agaricus species, which is the same genus, the same group as your store-bought button mushrooms and your portobello mushrooms. And the agaricus group is known for being high in antioxidants, good for gut health, good for boosting the immune system, may even protect against breast and prostate cancer, and may support blood sugar regulation. So I found that in the wild, but you can also buy mushrooms at the grocery store. Here's my mom showing us a hen of the woods, also known as maitake, which is also supposed to be good for blood sugar and immune function. And that's not in the Rocky Mountain region. That was in Connecticut that we found that. Definitely herbs and spices are very good to have, especially if you're not eating salt and sugar. You're going to want to find other ways to spice your foods. But also, herbs and spices are strong tasting. That's what makes them herbs and spices. So they tend to be richer in therapeutic phytonutrients with a range of positive actions on the body. So it's why cultural foods that rely on herbs and spice blends are usually much healthier for people who grew up in a tradition of eating them than when they leave their country and come to the US and start eating all of our junk food. There's a lot of reasons that's bad for them, but um, abandoning traditional herbs and spices is also not an awesome idea. So I would add them to your foods. So, what do I eat in a typical day? I usually eat for breakfast. Well, my smoothie now, just in the last 5 months, I love my smoothies. But I also will usually eat a whole grain, often pre-made, whether it's oatmeal, whether it's quinoa, and then I'll have fruit on it. So, blueberries, service berries if I want to eat wild fruits. And then I will also have usually a banana or a piece of fruit. And then for lunch, I usually have a big salad and then more smoothie and another piece of fruit. And for dinner, I usually have some kind of bean grain veggie combo and try to eat light and early. So I will say one thing about the whole food plant-based diet. You need to supplement B12. We don't get that in that diet. And I learned the hard way. I started getting dizzy spells and realized that I needed to supplement B12. So that's the one supplement I would say you probably need on a plant-based diet. You should be able to get plenty of calcium, plenty of protein, if you're eating a diverse and healthy plant-based diet. Okay, so just real quick, a couple more slides, and then we've gotten to the end of the presentation. So these are some of the other strategies that I have pursued over time, not all immediately. I started with plant-based whole food and SOS free, but over time I've learned other strategies that are health promoting. So those include eating organic. Intermittent fasting just means not eating late at night and then eating a little later in the morning. So you leave more time for your body to finish digesting and then start doing its processes of fixing issues in the body. And any of these topics are possibilities for the upcoming classes in the series, but it was too much to get into now. So I did find I reduced my caffeine because I drink a little bit of green tea, but I found it greatly reduced my anxiety that I used to experience and my stress. So alcohol and tobacco, not good for you. Daily meditation and stress reduction It took me a while to start doing daily meditation, but now I kind of rely on it to just keep me centered. Okay, just a few slides on where can I go for some ideas of what to cook if I really want to do this. I just found this website, I don't know, 6 months ago, eatplantbased.com, and I love it. Not everything has ingredients that I like, uh, but a lot of it is whole food plant. Well, it's all whole food plant based, but a lot of it is free of oil or salt or sugar too. So you can pick and choose through it, but I recommend this website for ideas. And then I really love from that same website their vegan cheese sauce because let's face it, sometimes you just want to indulge in some cheesy potato, baked potato. And that sauce is just made of onions, potatoes, carrots, some nutritional yeast, and some spices. And now, my dad is devil's advocate. He'll be like, that doesn't taste exactly like cheese sauce. And it does have salt in it. This recipe has salt in it. And I usually cut the salt in half. Because one thing about those smoothies that I'm drinking and the extra hydration I'm doing, you actually do need a little added salt. So, okay, I put a little salt in there. Um, but I think it's a wonderful substitute. And most my friends who are interested in healthy eating have thought the same. Chef AJ is well known for her whole food plant based diet and SOS free eating. She has lots of plant based recipes, some hers, some shared by people who come on her YouTube show. So I've linked in the links not only her website, but also her YouTube show. She has hundreds of videos and she has people on sharing how to make healthy alternatives to delicious foods. Look at her outrageous brownies. We make brownies all the time, but we just put chickpeas in them and not butter and oil and sugar. And there are ways to make them taste good, reasonable substitutes, I would say. So, yeah, I'd recommend Chef AJ. I was actually on the show doing a dandelion soup if you ever want to look that up. Okay, so I just want to conclude by saying it is entirely possible to eat delicious, wonderful food on a plant-based diet. Here I am serving my sister vegan sushi, and you can see we're drinking our smoothies. I didn't push that smoothie thing on her, but she suffers from autoimmune conditions, and she also travels a lot for work. And she has noticed since she decided to start drinking smoothies, without my pushing it on her. It's just I served her smoothies one time. She has found that she normally gets sick on those trips, and she has found that she's staying healthy. She's 6 weeks into her travel, and she hasn't caught anything. So fingers crossed. But yeah, and this is we also went skiing, and ski areas are notorious for terrible food, also very expensive food. But look what we did. We packed our greens and our avocado and our beets and our sweet potatoes and our pepitas into bags, and I grabbed us some plates, and we made these wonderful salads to have in the middle of the day. So it is possible. It's even possible to do when you're somewhere where you wouldn't think you'd be able to eat something healthy. Okay. So, yeah, we've gone to the end, and just a couple quick words, and then I'll open up the chat if anyone wants to um, talk about stuff in the chat. But this coupon that you use to get this class for free, unless you're a WFG Learn member, but if you use that coupon, Get Health, I decided to just make this class free for anyone, anywhere, anytime. So if you know of anyone who you think might benefit or appreciate the content of this presentation, please just spread the word. They can use that coupon and it's going to work indefinitely. And again, this is the first in a series called Healthy and Wild, that in future episodes, we are going to do a briefer treatment of yeah, in future episodes, we're going to do a briefer treatment of a topic of choice, whether it's organic food, whether it's how to sweeten my food. And then we're going to do, cooking and recipes and healthy food strategies. But we're going to be using wild food, but you can apply it to conventional food. So, and I'm not totally sure how I'm going to price those yet. But if you want all the classes, the healthy and wild classes, plus the other classes that I offer, please consider joining the WFG Learn program. It goes such a long way towards supporting my work. This is a labor of love, and I thank you a million times over for supporting me if you decide to join or if you're already joined. On the screen, you can see some of the topics. This isn't even all of them. There's 16 right now. So if you join, so the price to join is either $15 a month, which adds up to like 180 a year. But or you can join for 125 a year. So there's some savings there. And then when you do, you get all 16 classes plus everything else I teach in a year. So it's a ton of content. There's also about 1,000 pages of written magazine wild food content as well that you can download as a PDF. So, whew, that was a mouthful. Let me, oh yeah, and you can find me at wildfoodgirl.com. You probably already know that. Cool. So I'm going to stop the share. And yeah, I think it is time to go to the chat. So again, I think it would be best if we just keep the, oh, there's not that many of us on live, is there? Well, anyway, let's just go and answer questions in the chat. Or I think I am going to undo mute all. Yeah, so if you decided you wanted to like get on the mic and ask your question, that's okay too, but you will be recorded and shared. But I'm going to just start with the chat here. So looking down, I have a question from Diane. If you avoid oils, what kind of pans, grills do you use? Yeah, I don't have much experience grilling, so that's a little hard for me to answer, but I don't like the traditional nonstick pans, but I have been using ceramic coated nonstick pans. So again, I think if anyone wants to chime in and keep going in this conversation, you can, but otherwise I'm just going to go to the next question. So, oh yeah, Greg already answered that. Awesome. Thanks, Greg. My husband, Greg, responded to Diane as well. Oh yeah, and thank you, Greg, for pointing out that a little bit of water or broth instead of oil in the pan. So yeah, there's a whole cooking technique. Let's say you want to cook vegetables, but you don't want to use oil. Then there's a whole technique where you put a splash of broth in the base of the pan and you cook the vegetables down until they caramelize. And then you add a little more broth and you caramelize them again, and you get like kind of a sweet caramelized nice vegetables but without having to saute them in oil. So that, and I have other cooking techniques that I'm hoping to go through in the rest of the sessions. So, and then Chris says, thank you. Always good reinforcement and reminders. I follow many of your resources, but I'm not always following consistently enough, but truly believe Whole Foods is the best. Okay. Thanks, Chris. It looks like she had to go early. Jelena, yeah, thank you for your comment. Cool. All right. Looks like a lot of these are people who had to go early and are saying thank you and stuff. So does anybody else want to talk about any of these ideas? Or I'm also open to feedback if this was helpful to you. Was I preaching to the choir? Is it new? Or if you had questions or comments. So opened up if you're interested. Oh, Shelley, Shelley, you're welcome. Shelley is saying thank you for bringing up fats and diabetes. Cool. Thank you for being here, Shelley. Cool. Well, if we've gotten to the end, oh, if we join for the year, can we rewatch your videos anytime? Hi, Jessica. Yes, thank you for asking that. So this particular video you will have forever access to, but if you do join the subscription, whether for a year or ongoing for multiple years, yeah, you can rewatch the videos anytime for as long as you're a member. They will all come up in your accounts and you can watch them over and over again. Sanaya, this was so informative, Erica. Thank you. Question, why no salt? Based on the kind of salt used, I understand some kinds aren't good, but even the good kinds are bad. Uh, yeah, and to be honest with you, I'd like to look into that a little deeper, but basically, The salt, most of the extra salt that we get is from processed foods. So when you cut out processed foods, you get rid of a lot of that extra salt. But where I think I might have even, I wonder, you know what, I have those notes in a different document. So um, let's see, iodized salt is better because you do want to get that iodine. Uh, but yeah, the no salt is that idea is to correct the fact that most of us eat too much salt. So I think if you're cutting out the processed foods, the idea is not to put tons of salt in everything that you eat. But I've been a little back and forth on that one because I'm hydrating so much and drinking those smoothies, I do need a little bit of salt. If you are doing an intense workout, you might need a little bit of salt. I think I think there's some wiggle room with that one, but if you're hypertensive, if you have high blood pressure, if you're showing up as high blood sodium on your medical tests, then you probably want to be a little more careful. But yeah, that is what I did when I started. But now I'm a little more flexible with it. Um, Jessica, thank you for the kind words. Awesome, all caps. Thanks. Um, And Diane, it is what I believe in, but I'm only partially there. Thank you for the new information and reinforcement. I just joined. Oh, Diane, that's so awesome. I can't wait to see you in the other classes too. And thanks for the kind words. I'm glad it could be some health help. I was felt a little like I'm putting myself out there on on this presentation because this is pretty new to me. So your kind words are really supportive, and I really appreciate them. Um, Christina, thank you, Christina. Uh, yeah, Christina is a good friend of mine, and she's been eating green smoothies. Oh, also want to mention that it took longer for my taste buds to evolve. Okay, but I'm getting there. Quitting salt has been the hardest. Yeah, I know. Some of us love our sugar and some of us love our salt. You know, my husband, he does mostly what I do, diet wise, but yeah, he doesn't want to give up those pita chips with that little bit of oil and salt. Is he eating way healthier than he used to? Absolutely. So again, room, I think, for individuals. For me, cancer is scary, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep it from coming back to the best of my ability with the best of the information I have available to me. Um, but yeah, okay, Shelley, I recently read that even 2,400 milligrams recommended is based on our current diet, but should be much lower in reality. Are you talking about, I think you're talking about salt, Shelley. Um, but let me know if you're not talking about salt. Yeah, I want to say because I actually was going to do a whole section on the SOS free diet in this presentation, and then I realized that it was just way too much. So I'm going to save that for another time. But yeah, I think it was that we average eating 1.5 teaspoons of salt a day, including table salt and our processed foods, and we should be eating 1 teaspoon or less. So it's not a huge difference, but most Americans or the average American is eating more than the recommended daily allowance, even by USDA standards. Okay, Sanaya, nice to see you. Have a good rest of your weekend. Yeah, Shelley was talking about salt. So, anybody else have anything that you want to talk about? We're at the end of the chat. Well, all right. Well, if we are at the end of the chat, it looks like people are having to drop off and get to their weekends. So if there's nothing else anyone has to say, I just another thank you for being here, and hope to see you again soon. So, and please share. Okay. Have a good weekend, everybody.